Welcome to Unplugged.
Unplugged.
Welcome to Unplugged.
Unplugged.
Revisited.
Greetings and salutations. Welcome back to Unplugged Revisited, the podcast that celebrates, critiques, and dives deep into the last 3.5 decades of MTV Unplugged. I'm your host, music journalist, pop culture anthropologist, and Unplugged obsessive, Will Hodge. For this week's episode, I'm really stoked to have the opportunity to once again talk about Nirvana's mythical, magical, era-defining MTV Unplugged episode and album. While I did a standalone episode early on with Nirvana cellist Laurie Goldston, and I bring it up in one way or another, on average, at least every other episode, I'm excited that today's show affords me the opportunity to address the band's renowned live acoustic performance from a slightly different vantage point.
We passed upon the stair.
For this episode, I'm going to briefly swerve from my regular artist interview and intersection format to instead bring you a story about the forthcoming Kurt Cobain Unplugged exhibition that'll be running at London's Royal College of Music throughout the upcoming summer and fall. I've also got a really cool chat with the exhibit's curator, distinguished rock journalist Alan Perna, to dig even further into this incredible retrospective. The Kurt Cobain Unplugged exhibition will debut at the Royal College of Music on June 3rd and will run all the way through to November 18th. Tickets for available days can still be purchased via the Royal College of Music's website or directly from their box office via phone or email. While the exhibit will feature a plethora of Nirvana rarities like original gig posters, some of Kurt's handwritten papers, limited edition vinyl still in its original shrink wrap, and other artistic ephemera, the two absolutely jaw-dropping pieces that are anchoring the Unplugged-centric show are Kurt's legendary Martin D18-E Acoustic guitar, which this will be the first time it has been on display in the UK, and his iconic olive green mohair cardigan, and this will be the first time these two items have ever been on display together anywhere. These are easily two of the most visually striking and immediately recognizable items associated not only with Nirvana's landmark Unplugged episode and album, but also with the broader 90s pop cultural canon as well. And look, let me just address it up top. I know there are a wide variety of valid opinions about the nature of pop cultural historical artifacts, and how items like this are even procured, and who is and isn't served by their public presentation and commercialization, and all of that. I'm even more sensitive to the broad spectrum of opinions surrounding Kurt's Unplugged acoustic because not only is Nirvana one of my most internalized, deeply personal favorite bands, but also because the fraught backstory of how the guitar has changed hands over the years is just, to me at least, a little depressing. If you're not familiar with the whole story, I won't get into all of the nitty-gritty details here, but just know the main story points are: after Kurt's death in 1994, the guitar was left to his daughter, Frances Bean Cobain. Many years later, in 2018, when Frances was in divorce proceedings with her first husband, the guitar was, shall we say, disappointedly, awarded to her ex-husband as part of the larger divorce settlement. And then, in 2020, it went up for public auction and astoundingly sold for a little over $6 million to Australian entrepreneur and founder of Rode Microphones, Peter Friedman, making it the single most expensive guitar to ever be sold at auction. While Friedman seems like a nice enough dude, and it's cool that he seems intent on sharing the revered guitar with a larger audience by doing things like generously loaning it to the Royal College of Music for this exhibit, as a diehard Nirvana fan, and also just as, an empathetic human being, it's really hard not to want to see this guitar safe and sound back in Frances's possession. But I digress. Oh, and I should also note, London's Royal College of Music is about as legit of an institution as you could hope to see such a historical, culture-impacting guitar like this get an exhibition in. Their own collection includes around 1,000 instruments dating from the late 15th century to the mid-20th century, including, and I quote, the oldest guitar in the world, which was built in 1581 and has been in their possession since the 1890s.
That belongs in a museum!
Okay, to set up my chat with Perna, instead of working up one of my typical intersection-branded micro-histories, I'd like to contextualize our conversation by quickly discussing 3 overlapping and intertwining story points. First, the role of the acoustic guitar in popular music, pre and post Unplugged. Second, Kurt's relationship to the acoustic guitar, leading up to and including Unplugged. And third, a very brief and broad-stroked look at pop culture memorabilia through the lens of the top 10 most expensive guitars sold at public auction, which, it may surprise you to find out, mini spoiler alert, 3 of the top 10 spots are held by Kurt's guitars. But before we get into all that Nirvana-drenched fun and frivolity, let me take care of a few announcements.
Announcement 1.
I've gotten some really kind and encouraging responses to my last episode with Alice in Chains bassist Mike Inez, even more so after some folks were maybe looking for a little commiseration after the band had to cancel some tour dates due to drummer Sean Kinney's health scare. So first off, best wishes to him for a speedy recovery. But also, while I normally handle the listener mailbag stuff pretty sparingly, I did want to share a nice note about the episode from a listener named Kyle in California, who wrote, "I just listened to your recent Alice in Chains episode, and I've got to say it was chef's kiss. I know Mike Inez was a nice guy, but man, he was the nicest guy ever. Thoughtful answers, and finally the friends don't let friends get friends haircuts, mystery solved. Awesome work, man. You made my normal, boring commute to work an absolute treat." Dude, thank you so much for reaching out, Kyle, and I'm so glad you enjoyed the episode. I gotta say, people letting me know they listen to the pod on their work commute, or at work, or while they're doing dishes or exercising or whatever, that is just one of the biggest compliments to me. Those individualized activities, as normal, humdrum life moments as they are also, to me at least, sacred spaces where you could be listening to literally anything else. And I don't take it for granted whenever anyone chooses to share their valuable time with me and something I've created. So, my thanks to Kyle for the nice note, and also for everyone listening right now. Y'all are absolutely amazing, and you spending your time with the pod means the world to me.
Announcement 2.
This is just a friendly reminder that I'm running a CD and vinyl giveaway for the new enhanced edition of Eric Clapton's multiple Grammy-winning, 26 million selling Unplugged album. It's an expanded 17-song collection featuring day-of interview snippets and some extra songs not included in the original broadcast and album, and it's being released in both double CD and triple vinyl versions. All you have to do to enter is send an email to unpluggedrevisited@gmail.com telling me one thing you like about Clapton's Unplugged episode or album, put contest in the subject line, and specify if you want to enter the CD or vinyl giveaway, and yes, you can totally send a separate email for each one. And as a bonus, you can double your chances by rating and reviewing the podcast wherever you stream it, and attaching a screenshot of that to your email. Winners will be announced in the next episode.
Announcement 3.
And speaking of my next episode, which, by the way, is going to be an absolutely incredible one built around one of my most favorite and oft-referenced Unplugged episode and albums of all time, so you're not going to want to miss it. Just a heads up that it will be functioning as my Season 1 finale, followed by me taking the summer off to attend to some other shenanigans, and then returning with Season 2 on September 3rd. I recommend procuring your sackcloth and ashes ahead of the rush, and please plan your downtime/mourning accordingly. Okay, in lieu of our regularly scheduled intersection, I'm going to contextualize my discussion with Alan Perna about the Kurt Cobain Unplugged exhibit by quickly framing up that trio of interwoven Venn diagram topics I mentioned earlier. And again, these are very admittedly and intentionally broad-stroked in an effort to have them build upon each other, as opposed to academically drilling down into each one individually. So please temper those, well actually, corrective emails if I skip over one or two of your personal favorite examples. Okay, first up, let's speed run through the role of the acoustic guitar in popular music pre- and post-Unplugged. When it comes to the acoustic guitar's place in the history of recorded popular music, its presence during the first half of the 20th century, especially in America, was mostly, but not exclusively, found in roots music genres. The blues, country, traditional folk, gospel, jazz, railroad songs, bluegrass, those often regionalized of the people genres that are more handed down and passed around than focused around superstar making, career fashioning commercialization. By the 1950s, the acoustic guitar was functioning as a foundational component in a lot of classic country, like Patsy Cline and Hank Williams.
Well, why don't you love me like you used to do? How come you treat me like a worn-out shoe?
As well as the rhythm and blues and rockabilly greats coming out of the Sun Records scene, like Rufus Thomas, Elvis Presley, and the immortal Johnny Cash.
Now I taught the weeping willow how to cry.
During the decade, the acoustic guitar was also an integral element of Harry Belafonte's groundbreaking 1956 album Calypso, which became the first ever full-length record to sell over 1 million copies, thanks to hit singles like Deo, the Banana Boat song, and Jamaica Farewell.
My heart is down, my head is turning around. I had to leave a little girl in Kingston town.
In the 1960s, the acoustic guitar had a bit of a doubled-down cultural renaissance, thanks first to the mid-century folk revival taking place throughout the US and the UK, especially in the hands of traditional folk luminaries like Bob Dylan, Joan Baez, and the incomparable Odetta.
Hello, woke up this morning with my mind, Lord, sound free.
And second, through the rise and the popularity of the acoustic-anchored folk rock scene, spearheaded by acts like the Byrds, Buffalo Springfield, and the Mamas and the Papas. Also during this period, the uber-transcendent and ever-evolving Beatles substantially pushed acoustic guitars to the front of their sound even more on their Help, Rubber Soul, and Revolver albums.
I once had a girl, or should I say, she once had me.
During the 1970s, acoustic guitars became the star of the show for both the stripped-back singer-songwriter genre, like James Taylor, a now solo Paul Simon, and Joni Mitchell.
Sitting in a park in Paris, France, reading the news and it sure looks bad. They won't give peace a chance. That was just a dream some of us had.
As well as the normally bombastic but occasional acoustic rabbit trails of hard rock, prog rock, and heavy metal acts like The Who, Yes, and most notably Led Zeppelin.
Hangman, hangman, hold it a little while. I think I see my brother coming riding many a mile.
But it was the 1980s when the acoustic guitar seemed like it was finally ready to strut its stuff all the way to the top of the mainstream pop charts. And while acoustic-anchored genre acts like Violent Femmes, Indigo Girls, Graceland-era Paul Simon, and Tracy Chapman were really making waves, and hard rock power ballads were covertly infiltrating radio, MTV, skating rinks, and mall food courts everywhere, by the mid to late 80s, the acoustic guitar was also showing up strong in mainstream top 40 pop via some massive chart-topping Billboard Hot 100 number ones like George Michael's Faith in 1987, and Poison's Every Rose Has Its Thorn across late 88 into early 89.
Every rose has its thorn.
And this, of course, is when MTV Unplugged comes into the picture. Conceived and prepped across early 1989, its pilot episode taped and broadcast that October and November, and then its first 4 official episodes filmed in mid-December 89 and aired across January and February of 1990.
Isn't it about time MTV pulled the plug? MTV Unplugged, an all-new half-hour special for music lovers. This Sunday, watch Difford and Dilbrook of Squeeze, singer Sid Straw and host Jules Shear throw away their amps and get down to some great music, up close and acoustic.
As Unplugged made its first big splashes with close to 20 episodes aired throughout 1990, the acoustic guitar was simultaneously showing up even more on the top 40 pop charts, with songs like John Bon Jovi's solo hit Blaze of Glory, Nelson's Can't Live Without Your Love and Affection, and Alana Miles's Black Velvet all spending time at number 1 throughout 1990.
Black velvet, if you please.
Over the next couple years, the hand-in-hand trend of Unplugged gaining traction and popularity on MTV, while acoustic-centric songs were apexing the mainstream pop charts and radio, continued in tandem, with Extreme's More Than Words becoming a massive number 1 hit in 1991.
Saying I love you is not the words I want to hear from you.
And Mr. Big's To Be With You, The Heights' How Do You Talk to an Angel, and Whitney Houston's cover of I Will Always Love You, all hitting number 1 at different points across 92.
And will always love you.
And not for nothing, it should be noted that Whitney's acoustic chart topper remained at number 1 for 14 weeks, masterfully reigning atop the chart from late November 92 to late February 93. 1992 was also when Unplugged first transcended beyond its televised bonds to find additional mainstream successes via radio, retail, and the pop charts, when Mariah Carey's cover of I'll Be There from her Unplugged episode and EP hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100. Over the next couple of years, various other Unplugged episodes also generated great acoustic-led successes with radio hits from Eric Clapton, 10,000 Maniacs, Jodeci, and Rod Stewart, as well as Clapton's multi-platinum, Grammy-winning Unplugged album, spending a few weeks at number 1 on the Billboard 200 album charts in 93, and Nirvana's multi-platinum, Grammy-winning Unplugged album, debuting at number 1 in 94. I'll go just one more interrelated step further to say that 94 also saw the acoustic guitar lead the sonic charge on 2 more extremely notable mainstream musical milestones. First, in January, Alice in Chains' acoustic-heavy Jar of Flies became the first ever EP to not just hit, but debut at number 1 on the Billboard 200 albums chart. It's alright. And second, that summer, Lisa Loeb became the first ever artist without a record deal to hit number 1 on the Hot 100 with her surprise hit single, Stay, I Missed You.
You say I only hear what I want to.
Now, I know as a society we have all agreed to the axiom that correlation doesn't imply causation, and I'm not at all saying that MTV Unplugged is solely responsible for all these acoustic-forward songs suddenly hitting number 1 on the mainstream pop charts. However, there's no denying that the broader impact of the show and its popularization and expansive sonic showcase of the acoustic guitar across multiple genres unquestionably helped to both freshly inspire artists and songwriters, as well as, and perhaps most importantly, also coolly instruct, inform, and reframe the way audiences, both casual and fan, receive and respond to quote-unquote acoustic music. Okay, I could keep harping on this point and stretch out the timeline into a few more years of the simpatico dance between Unplugged's cultural cool and acoustic-forward top 40 pop chart toppers from acts like Bryan Adams, Blackstreet, Toni Braxton, and many others. But I'll just rest the defense here and move on to the next connected point. Kurt's relationship to the acoustic guitar, leading up to and including Unplugged. Okay, again, another speedrun, snapshot approach to this one, but let's briefly look at how Kurt tastefully and judiciously employed the acoustic guitar in Nirvana's songwriting catalog over the band's all too brief window of output. For a band perhaps most known for their loud, unruly live wire performances, I think Kurt's acoustic prowess really underscores the melodic intuition and intellect that fuels the core of his songwriting. As far as their trio of full-length studio albums, Bleach, their initially underrated debut album from 1989, perhaps not so surprisingly has 0 acoustic songs. But Nevermind, their massively influential, culture-impacting follow-up from 1991, finds Kurt really unpacking a couple new corners of his songwriting genius with a pair of genuinely entrancing acoustic ballads. First up is Polly, a minor-key, mostly solo acoustic number that Kurt recorded on a $31.23 pawn shop Stella acoustic.
Polly wants a cracker. Think I should get off her first.
Whose uniquely dry sound was made even more unconventional by the fact that A, it was a 12-string guitar curiously outfitted with just a standard 6-pack of nylon strings, B, it was completely missing one of those strings, and C, Kurt didn't even change out the remaining 5 age-unknown ones. Second is Something in the Way, a deliciously moody, cello-enriched full-band acoustic number that serves as the de facto album closer, even though, since it was the 90s, Nevermind does have a secret hidden track, a cathartically raw noise jam called Endless Nameless that barrels into the room about 10 minutes after the end of Something in the Way.
Something in the way.
And then, on their final studio album, 1993's In Utero, there aren't really any, proper acoustic numbers per se. But because Kurt recorded many of his vocals while playing that same pawn shop Stella, which was not mic'd up but can still occasionally be heard bleeding into Kurt's vocal mic, you can still hear some ghostly acoustic specters in songs like Dumb, All Apologies, and especially Pennyroyal Tea.
I'm on my time with everyone.
Now, for the majority of Nirvana fans at the time, this was pretty much all the acoustic Nirvana material that was available to dig into until their MTV Unplugged episode was broadcast in mid-December 93. And we'll get into that in just a moment. But when the band's phenomenal box set With the Lights Out was released in late 2004, the 3-disc set included a surprising amount of acoustic material from a radio show and various home demos recorded across the early 90s. I won't catalog out everything here, but just to give you a little sampling, here's 2 representative snippets. First, here's Kurt playing a solo acoustic version of Lithium from a September 25, 1990 in-studio college radio show at Evergreen State College in Olympia, Washington.
I'm so happy 'cause today I found my friends in my head.
And second, here's Kurt's solo acoustic home demo of one of my all-time favorite Nirvana songs, Sliver, recorded into a boombox in 1990.
Mom and Dad went to a show. They dropped me off at Crown Jewels.
And then, of course, the jewel in the crown of any discussion of acoustic Nirvana is their bewitching MTV Unplugged episode, first aired on MTV in mid-December 93 and released as the multi-platinum, chart-topping, Grammy-winning album Unplugged in New York in November 94.
This is off our first record. Most people don't own it.
During the impressively raw and compelling performance, fans of Nirvana's bombastic, explosive, feedback-drenched melodic muscle were treated to the band's pitch-perfect adaptability to the bare-bones musicality of Unplugged's acoustic sandbox. And man, did they deliver in spades on song after song after song. They brilliantly reframed their electrified originals,
Love myself better than you.
elevated their small handful of already acoustic numbers, instrumentally spiced up the set with accordion and cello, invited some friends along to give Kurt the rare opportunity to just sing,
Where the bad folks go when they die, they don't go to heaven where the angels fly.
and even gave a moment over to just Kurt and his guitar.
I'm so tired, I can't sleep.
And amidst all of the acoustic sonic spellcasting coming from every corner of the stage was the central convergence point of Kurt's arresting vocals and his inviting yet unorthodox acoustic guitar. Much like the 5 strings on a 12-string Stella Pawnshop acoustic that was a close companion during Kurt's songwriting, recording, and touring years, the acoustic he played on Unplugged defied convention across a few different parameters as well. You'll hear Alan Perna get into it more during our chat, but just to hit a few notes about Kurt's Unplugged guitar here, it was a 1959 Martin D18-E Acoustic electric guitar, which was already a rare bird model before Kurt even got his hands on one and started tinkering with it. It was a right-handed guitar, which had to be switched over to Kurt's left-handed playing style, which, for the non-guitar players out there, is usually a pretty easy thing to spot when you see that a guitar's pickguard and volume and tone knobs are all upside down and not in the most intuitively usable spots. And Kurt also tweaked its already unique sound even further to his own tonal predilections by first adding in a new sound hole pickup, and then also running it through an amplifier and a few of his effects pedals, like his trusty DS2 distortion pedal and his shimmery Electro-Harmonix small clone chorus. And while some of Unplugged's most revered episodes are celebrated precisely for the pure, clean warmth of more traditional acoustic guitar tones, I think the irregular sonic descent of Kurt's Unplugged acoustic tonalities is one of the truest, most intoxicating, and most authentic musical statements to ever grace the Unplugged stage. Pop culture memorabilia through the lens of the top 10 most expensive guitars sold at public auction. Alright, this one will be brief, but I think it's contextually interesting. When we're talking about the often exorbitant price tags of pop culture memorabilia, and just as a reminder, the two anchor items of the upcoming Kurt Cobain Unplugged exhibit are a sweater that sold for over $330,000 in 2019 and a guitar that sold for over $6 million in 2020. There are quite a few factors that can shade the spectrum of opinions on this sort of thing. Whenever these stories show up in the news about how some item of historical pop cultural significance is headed to auction, I think it's perfectly valid for us to start from a place of questioning skepticism. What is the nature of the item? Who is selling it? Is it a public or private sale? How did they come by possessing the item? Is the item's original owner of note involved in any way, or are they even still alive? I believe all of those types of questions and many more of their ilk are not only natural, but frankly necessary inquiries within the whole unwieldy realm of pop culture memorabilia. But for the purposes of our show today, I just want to take a broadly sweeping glance at the practice through the singular lens of the top 10 most expensive guitars to be sold at auction, of which Kurt's Unplugged acoustic sits decidedly unchallenged at the very top by a significant margin. Now, for most folks who hear a phrase like the top 10 most expensive guitars sold at auction, conventional reasoning probably elicits images of rock god royalty, seasoned, technically proficient electric guitar virtuosos known for their complex playing styles and fiery solos, and their trusted instruments of choice from across decades of a career spent recording and touring. And to be sure, half of the top 10 do fall into that category. David Gilmour's 54 number 1 Strat at number 9, which sold for $1.8 million in 2019. Jerry Garcia's custom Wolf guitar at number 8 sold for $1.9 million in 2017. The guitar at number 6, while being a bit of an anomaly, would probably fall into this category as well, as it was a Fender Strat signed by a legion of rock gods that sold for $2.7 million at a charity auction to benefit the victims of the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami. And then there's one of Eddie Van Halen's red and white Kramers at number 4, sold for $3.93 million in 2023. And then David Gilmour's famous black Strat at number 3 sold for $3.97 million in 2019. In fact, if you extend the list out just a bit wider, 3 of the guitars in the 11 through 15 spots are held by the same caliber of virtuoso rockers, 1 from Eric Clapton and 2 from Jeff Beck. But the other half of the top 10 is really interesting, to me at least, because number 1, all 5 spots are held by just 2 musicians, Kurt Cobain and John Lennon. 2, neither of those individuals are necessarily considered prototypical rock god guitar wizards. 3, the guitars, for the most part, are tied not to the span of their careers, but to specific singular events that are part of a larger visual component. And 4, surprising to me at least, 3 of the 5 are acoustics. Okay, I feel like I'm holding in a sneeze, so let me quickly show you what I mean by finishing out that top 10 list. At number 10, Kurt's 93 Fender Mustang, most associated with Nirvana's last show on March 1st, 1994, which sold for $1.5 million in 2023. Number 7, John Lennon's 1962 Gibson J160E Acoustic from the Beatles movie A Hard Day's Night, which sold for $2.4 million in 2015. Number 5, John Lennon's Hootenanny 12-string acoustic from the Beatles' other movie Help, which sold for $2.8 million in 2024. At number 2, Kurt's 1969 Fender Mustang from the Smells Like Teen Spirit music video, which sold for $4.5 million in 2022. And sitting atop the list by roughly a $1.5 million gap is Kurt's 1959 Martin D18-E Acoustic that he nonchalantly altered the cultural and musical landscape with on Unplugged, which sold for a little over $6 million in 2020. Do you want to hear even more about this mystical tool of musical transcendence? This incredibly important piece of pop culture history? This insanely mythically cool cultural artifact that will soon be on display at London's Royal College of Music in the Kurt Cobain Unplugged exhibition running this summer and fall? Well, if you do, then here's my Unplugged Revisited chat with the exhibition's curator, renowned music journalist and rock historian Alan Perna. I'm incredibly excited to chat with my guest today, renowned music journalist Alan Perna, about his curation work on the brand new Kurt Cobain Unplugged exhibit running throughout the summer and fall at the Royal College of Music in London. Thank you so much for joining the show to talk Unplugged with me today, Alan.
Oh, my pleasure.
For listeners who may be hearing about this exhibit for the first time, can you start off by telling us a little bit about the items visitors can expect to encounter, most notably the 2 legendary pieces that will be anchoring the whole thing?
Okay, yeah, you're right. The big guns of the exhibition are definitely the Martin D18-E guitar, electrified acoustic guitar that Kurt Cobain played not only on the Unplugged episode, but in the final year of his life. I believe he used this to some live shows. Courtney Love says that it's the last guitar that Kurt ever played. We also have the cardigan, the sweater that Kurt wore for the performance. That's quite an interesting artifact in and of itself. It's got cigarette burns. It's got some kind of stain in the pocket. It's missing a button. It's an item that was literally close to Kurt in the final year of his life. A costume historian described it as a security blanket of a sweater for Kurt. So those are the 2 main items, and this is the first time that they'll be viewed together in this exhibition, and also the first time the guitar will be seen in England, and indeed seen anywhere other than Australia. So around that, we've curated a selection of items. We have a few items that are in Kurt's own hand, lyric sheets, a brief note to an early manager, and a poster that Kurt designed himself for an early Nirvana gig. That's one of many collectible posters that we also have for the exhibition. One to us by the collector Oliver Lawson. They also provided us with a generous selection of collectible vinyls, rare editions, limited editions, things like that. Oh, and taking a closer look at the guitar itself and what makes it unique, we've got the soundboard section, the top guitar portion from a comparable model to Kurt's, so you can actually look inside, see the pickup assembly, and we compare that with a traditional Martin guitar. We also have the top portion from a traditional Martin guitar, so you can see what was involved in electrifying the instrument back in 1959. Maybe a little geeky for some, but I think the guitarists out there will appreciate that. And we've got some audio-visual content as well, including some excerpts from an interview that I did with Pat Smear, where he talks about playing on Unplugged and talks about his time with Nirvana a little bit. That'll be part of the audio-visual content. But also, there'll be a display case devoted to the phenomenon of collecting Nirvana itself. It's a bit of an obsession for some people. Nirvana themselves are a bit of a cultural obsession globally, so we'll be looking at that phenomenon as well. The exhibition is very much focused on Unplugged and topics surrounding Unplugged, things that contextualize Nirvana Unplugged live in New York.
That whole collection sounds just absolutely amazing. I really do hope that I'm actually going to be able to make my way out there to see it myself. But, it is no secret that Kurt's unplugged guitar and the cardigan, those are the absolute standouts of that exhibit. What's the backstory on how this whole project came together around this iconic pair of pop culture artifacts, as well as how you came to be involved in it?
Well, it all began with the guitar, which was purchased at auction for $6.1 million by a gentleman named Peter Friedman, who's the CEO of Rode Microphone, a very prestigious microphone brand. He's also a supporter of the Royal College of Music, the Australian branch, and he visited the London branch and was shown around, and he was struck by a guitar that they have in their collection, which is the earliest known guitar anywhere. Yeah, 1518, I believe, a Portuguese instrument. So, seeing this and having acquired this historic Cobain guitar, he thought the museum would be a good venue to share the instrument with the world. He definitely bought the guitar with the intention of sharing it with fans, putting it on exhibition. I believe any proceeds from his end will be donated to music education and things like that. So Peter lent the guitar, and the job became, okay, how do we build a show around this? Yeah. So I was contacted by the museum's curator, Gabriel Rossi Rognoni. The Royal College of Music is principally a classical music institution. This is their first rock exhibition. Gabrielle's background is primarily in classical, so he needed a sort of rock expert. And I've been bouncing around the museum world, the music museum world, for a while. I consulted with the Metropolitan Museum of Art on their 2016 exhibition, Play It Loud, which was named after a book that I co-wrote. Yeah. So I came kind of highly recommended to Gabriel. He brought me on board. And my first thought was, okay, we have the guitar. I know about the auction by which the guitar was acquired. But I also remembered the cardigan, the sweater, which also sold for a record price at auction. Now, that went to an anonymous buyer who does not want to be identified, but I just happened to know Darren Julian at Julian's Auctions, and I wrote him an email, kind of a Hail Mary pass, saying, I don't know, but is there a way to get a message to the buyer to see if he or she would be interested in lending the sweater for the exhibition, and, thinking that the snowball's chance in hell, basically. But the word came back that indeed the owner would be willing to lend us the sweater. So we got that. And, as I said, it was a matter of contextualizing those items, building a show around that. Oliver Lawson is somebody who Gabrielle was associated with. He came forward with the posters, things like that. I got in touch with Martin Guitars. They were able to provide some material. The Museum of Popular Culture in Seattle, which has an incredible Nirvana collection, they were able to help us out with some items. So that's how it's come together.
That's amazing. That sounds like such an incredible collection. Just hearing you talk, I was also curious. I remember when the stories around the auction came out, I remember reading that the guitar case also had some extra items in it. There were like some extra picks and like a half-used pack of strings and like a suede stash bag, all this little stuff. Are those items on display as well that came with the guitar case?
Absolutely, yes. They'll be on display. Yeah, there were 2 or 3 picks, Dunlop, pretty standard picks if you're a guitar player. But the fact that they're Kurt's picks makes them special. There's a set of strings. There's a small pouch with 3 miniature knife, fork, and spoon. I think they're lapel pins. There's like a pin on the back to attach them to the lapel. What he was doing with those, if they were a gift that was given to him, I don't know. The case is personalized with a sticker from the band Poison Idea that I believe Nirvana played a date with. So yes, those items will also be on display and are kind of fascinating in and of themselves. I mean, all of this stuff just really helps create an intimate connection with Kurt.
That's amazing. I'm hoping to one day see a picture of that bag. I've heard it referenced in so many articles, but I've never actually come across a picture of it myself. So I'm so glad that's a part of the collection as well, just from selfish curiosity as well.
Yeah, no, it's definitely the kind of item where you scratch your head and say, well, what's this doing in his guitar case?
Right, exactly. It seems so weird and also so apropos, both. Very cool. Well, let's talk a little bit about the uniqueness of Kurt's unplugged guitar. The Martin D18-E itself, even before Kurt played it, is a pretty unusual and rare piece of acoustic guitar history. Can you tell us the story of that specific model and how Kurt customized his even further into sort of peculiar nonconformity?
Sure, yeah. The D18-E was first marketed in 1959. In 1959, you have to realize the world is going crazy for electric guitars. Mm-hmm. That's the year a lot of iconic Gibson models came out, and Fender, et cetera, et cetera. Martin wanted to get into the electric game, but they're primarily an acoustic guitar manufacturer, probably the foremost flat-top steel-string acoustic guitar manufacturer in the world. So they took their very popular D18 acoustic model and fitted it out with 2 electric pickups. They had to add some extra bracing in order to control the feedback. So the model was not that successful because in order to electrify it, it compromised the acoustic sound of the instrument. And since Martin's reputation is predicated on just the finest acoustic guitar sound you can get, the model didn't catch on. Consequently, only 302 were ever manufactured. Wow. So that makes it rare right there. Kurt's, we're pretty sure that Kurt's was the 7th production model D18-E to roll off the assembly line.
Wow.
Yeah, and there's an interesting little journey there in a way. We know when it left the Martin factory, in I believe March of 1959. We don't know what happened from there, but some 3 decades later, it turned up in a pawn shop in Alabama, where it was purchased by a gentleman named Lloyd Chie, the owner of the Voltage Guitar Shop in L.A. He bought it, and he's the one who sold it to Kurt. So now, when Kurt got it, as you've indicated, it needed to be modified for left-handed playing. Kurt was a left-handed player. So a few things needed to be done. He had to reverse the strings for left-handed playing, and that meant that they had to modify the nut of the guitar, and they had to modify the bridge, too, so the strings would sit securely in those slots. Those are both slotted pieces of Delrin or plastic or bone. And most importantly, a Bartolini pickup was added to the sound hole by Kurt's guitar tech, Ernie Bailey, a Bartolini 3AV. So it's really a 3 pickup instrument as it exists in Kurt's iteration. So it's totally neat. Unique in that regard. It's one of 203, and that one is unlike any other D18-E that's out there.
Yeah, it's like one of a kind across 12 different parameters. Well, by all measures of like technical quality and fidelity, Kurt's D18-E wasn't a quote-unquote traditional sounding acoustic, even more so when he ran it through a couple effects pedals and an amplifier. So what are your thoughts on how this specific guitar fit into the Nirvana sound and aesthetic and creative ethos, as opposed to if Kurt had played, the exact same unplugged set on a, for lack of a better word, conventional acoustic?
I like to think that the guitar is an outcast, like Kurt himself. It's one of a kind. It's a distinctive, unique instrument. I think why it was good for Unplugged is that with the Bartolini, it's got a credible acoustic sound. It sounds like an acoustic guitar, but yet, as you say, when it was amped up and effects were included, Man Who Sold the World, for instance, you can really hear the pedals there. It works pretty well as an electric guitar. It says to the ear, this is an electric guitar. So out of that one guitar, he was able to get everything he needed for the show. Other people who have done Unplugged and switched between different guitars and things like that. Kurt just Kurt was able to get everything that he needed out of that one instrument.
So true. You make an incredible point there. Sometimes on episodes of Unplugged, you see a guitarist play multiple guitars throughout the single show, but him just using that exact same guitar for every single song in the set, but yet it has so many different textures and colors to it. It's amazing he was able to get so much out of, such a unique piece like that.
Yeah, it's true he was cheating a little bit, but but the way I see it is that while the performance was not unplugged in the strictest sense, I think it was very true to the spirit of Unplugged. It was an intimate performance. It stripped away a lot of production values, and we get to the raw essence of Kurt's songwriting, and also to the raw essence of the songs, the cover songs that he chose, that influenced him, that shaped his sensibility. So I think it was an ideal guitar for the gig in a lot of ways.
Yeah, absolutely. So true. I also wanted to ask you a couple questions about the curious process that happens around certain popular instruments transforming into these top dollar display quality showpieces. First question, and this one has an admittedly long wind-up. There's something incredibly interesting to me about the overall nature of the collection of guitars that have sold for the most at auction. Many of them sort of make sense from a technically proficient guitarist standpoint. Like there's one of Eddie Van Halen's red and white striped Kramers. David Gilmour has 2 guitars in the top 10. There's Jerry Garcia and Jeff Beck, etc. But the number 1 and number 2 spots are both held by Kurt. His Fender Mustang from the Smells Like Teen Spirit music video sold for over $4.5 million. And as you've already mentioned, his Unplugged acoustic sold for over $6 million. So from your seasoned music journalist viewpoint, what does it say about Kurt, specifically as a guitarist, for 2 of his guitars to sort of outsell all these other, rock god guitarists that are on that list?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think probably the closest analogy I can make is John Lennon, who was not a technically proficient guitarist on the level of an Eric Clapton or a Jeff Beck. Certainly a really good rhythm guitarist. I think at a certain point when you get a figure that iconic, technical proficiency just becomes another consideration. You also have to consider that within the grunge era, Kurt Cobain was an incredibly influential guitarist. The whole loud, soft dynamic, the watery chorus verses that give way to explosive choruses, super distorted, the way he incorporates influences from metal, punk, even a little bit of dream pop, although that was in a way he anticipated, the dream pop thing. I think he was an influential player in that way for a lot of people who were coming up then. Guitar virtuosity is largely a 70s phenomenon, maybe an 80s phenomenon. I think as we move into the 90s, that becomes a little bit less central, or it becomes focused on a specific type of players, shred players like Steve Vai, Joe Satriani, people like that. But as far as the mainstream of rock culture goes, I think the influential figures are, you get people like Johnny Marr, Whitney Smith, Kevin Shields with My Bloody Valentine. They're not riffmeisters, but yet what they're doing is so intriguing and so compelling that each of those players that I named reinvented the electric guitar in their own way. So I think the value lies in that kind of perspective, and also just the pop culture superstar phenomenon. I mean, Kurt Cobain is now in a class with Elvis Presley or I don't know, Marilyn Monroe, people like that. So that's going to add a lot of cash value as well.
I love your answer. It makes me think of guitarists like Peter Buck as well from REM. Like so many people, they get really thorny if you say that Peter Buck wrote a quote unquote riff, because they're like, it's not technically riffs, but you're like, no one plays like Peter Buck as much as they think they do. It is a riff in and unto itself.
Right. Yeah, definitely. If you were a young player in that period, these are the guitarists you would have emulated.
So true. Well, second question about, what we can kind of glean from this grouping of most expensive guitars sold at auction. While most of the guitars on the list have more to do with their extended association to a guitarist's like larger career arc, it seems like Kurt's list-topping pair are very much associated with two highly specific visual moments, those being, a music video and a televised acoustic performance. To you, what does that say about the nature of this whole art becoming artifacts process whenever they turn into these museum-quality pieces?
So I think it speaks to the long-standing and incredibly powerful relationship between rock and roll and the visual media, video, television, films, from the beginning. Elvis Presley on the Ed Sullivan Show, the Alan Freed rock and roll movies. Rock and roll arguably could not have existed without the visual media, without television and everything. Yeah. So I think that these momentous, historic visual performances have a lot of impact because they're durable, unlike a live performance, which is here and gone, and only viewed by people who are in the hall at the time. Things that are captured on video become works of art in and of themselves.
Yeah.
The Beatles on the roof of Apple Music playing the final concert. I mean, that's, these moments like this are so much a part of the cultural fabric. And I think any physical object that's associated with one of those iconic moments is going to be something that's treasured by a lot of people, and therefore something that's going to command a high price at auction.
Yeah. And it's so nice to see things like that be sort of, like you said, intended to be shared with the public, because people that are paying this much for guitars, they can do whatever they want with them. But there are a lot of people that buy these items and then it might not make it out of their house or out of their office or things like that. And unless you know these people, you're never going to see it apart from maybe a picture, in an article or something. So I do think that's an extra incredibly cool component of this being attached to Kurt's guitar to actually go on exhibit, not just what you guys are doing in London over the summer and fall, but maybe some potential future plans as well. So I really love that y'all are doing that.
Yeah, that's great. It's to Peter Friedman, definitely, for his generosity.
Yeah, perfect. I've asked you a few questions about what Kurt's unplugged guitar can tell us about Kurt himself, but I'm also curious what you think the massive cultural interest around the guitar and its $6 million price tag can also tell us about the pop cultural impact and legacy of MTV Unplugged, both the specific Nirvana episode and album, as well as the whole arc of the show itself, especially throughout its popular 90s run.
Right, yeah. Well, MTV Unplugged it interests me because from the start with, Jules Shear, the earliest shows, it was a songwriter's medium, definitely. A chance to get into the guts of songs and strip away all the production values and things like that. So in a way, it became a sort of proving ground for the artists. People who are on the top of the charts. Okay, how well will you do in this somewhat more challenging setting, this somewhat more intimate setting? So I think it became like a sort of red bed of courage in a way for artists to do Unplugged. And it always reminded me a little bit of the Nashville tradition, where songwriters would sit around in a circle with their acoustic guitars and say, "Hey, this is my new song. What do you think?" Now of course, these people are largely playing hits and things like that, so it's not.
Do you have a favorite Unplugged episode, or ones that you think are maybe super notable or super underrated, anything like that?
I think the favorite for me, being a baby boomer and being a Beatles fan, is McCartney. That was just incredible, and the fact that he took the brief literally. He did it unplugged. He didn't use acoustic guitars that are fitted with a pickup. It's all microphones and everything. And I think I remember Linda McCartney playing a harmonium. I think she might have like a pumped harmonium, and
Yeah.
just really interesting, and a chance to feel closer to McCartney. When he went into something like Things We Said Today, he just like, I'm 13 again.
Right? Or to hear him forget the words to We Can Work It Out and be like, oh, he is actually human as well, not just an otherworldly musical giant. He's also a human being.
Yeah, and the fact that he wrote these songs. These are songs that a guy sat down in his living room or whatever with an acoustic guitar, summoned into existence. So yeah, that was a powerful one.
That's good. I love that you're calling that one out. On a few episodes, I've talked about how, across the spectrum of Unplugged, I see McCartney on one end, because like you're saying, he didn't even plug in his acoustics. He just had mics in front of him picking it up. And then the other end of that pole is Bruce Springsteen, because his Unplugged just essentially seemed like, I think he played acoustic on maybe 2 songs, maybe 3. Him just having completely electric band and playing electric guitars. You're like, okay, Bruce. But yeah, it's good. I love that you mentioned McCartney. That's a great one. For me, this whole conversation also sort of brings to mind Eric Clapton's Unplugged and the Martin 00042 that he played that was sold at auction for almost $800,000 back in 2004. That was a record for an acoustic guitar at that time, which of course has since been surpassed by Cobain. And there's a couple, John Lennon acoustics on the list as well. Of course, Clapton played more than one guitar during his Unplugged, but also his Unplugged album is still the best-selling live album of all time. And he's in like top tier, revered rock god status. So I was curious, in juxtaposing those two famously auctioned unplugged guitars, what do you think it is that has imbued Cobain's Unplugged guitar with so much more mystique and cultural cachet than Clapton's has?
In a word, death. I think we have to factor in that any great musician who passes away at an early age, at the magical age of 27, whether it's Jimi Hendrix or Janis Joplin, or they just become more precious to people because they're no longer here, and they were cut off before they really got to fully have their say as a creative artist. So I think that lends a lot of weight to Kurt's guitar, and also the timing of Unplugged. It aired just 4 months before his passing. It was very fresh in people's minds, and I can remember when he passed. I remember that the MTV aired that Unplugged segment in sort of constant rotation.
Absolutely.
This is before the internet era. If you wanted to. I don't know, breathe, if you wanted to feel close to Kurt, or if you wanted to just get some news or something, you would have tuned into MTV and you would have seen this show. So it's really burned into some tender part of rock's collective consciousness.
That's such a good point. I was literally had just turned 14 the month prior, and MTV was the place to go. Not understanding what to do with that gut punch of a moment. Just being able to sit in the atmosphere of that sort of security blanket, I think, was an important thing for countless 90s teens like myself. That's a very good point. Well, to close things out, circling back to the Kurt Cobain Unplugged Museum exhibit, as the curator, what do you hope visitors might experience while they're there? And what new understandings or emotions, if any, do you hope that they walk away with?
Certainly a sense of being closer, feeling a closeness to Kurt, feeling like you've been able to get inside his head a little bit with with some of the handwritten materials and the instruments, these very personal artifacts. We hope that it forges a connection to Kurt with fans who love him, and also to more casual viewers who might not be the biggest fans in the world. I sincerely hope that they'll learn more about Nirvana and that their curiosity will be piqued, so that they'll want to go back and maybe check out some recordings or some videos and things like that. You have to remember that the Royal College of Music Museum has a viewership of largely classical people, so we are going to be getting people who are not rock fans, and we wanted to make sure that the exhibition was resonant for them too. In writing the exhibition text, I've been very careful to not exclude people like that. For example, I use the term EP in a text. You and I know what an EP is, but the college didn't. So I thought, okay, this is an extended play record. It's longer than a single, but it's shorter than a long play. So I want to bridge the gap so that this is like Nirvana's music, like Kurt, something for everybody.
Oh, what a beautiful sentiment. I love that. That's amazing. Well, Alan, it's been such a pleasure talking with you about the legacy and ongoing story of Kurt's unplugged guitar. I appreciate you taking the time to join the show today, and best of luck with the Kurt Cobain Unplugged exhibit this summer and fall.
Thank you, Will. Yeah, thank you for having me.
Man, it's always a fun day for me when I get to talk Nirvana's Unplugged, and it was so cool to hear even more about how awesome the Kurt Cobain Unplugged exhibition sounds like it's going to be. For any listeners in the UK planning to check out the exhibit in person, please feel free to email me your thoughts and experiences. I'm not only very curious about it, but I'm also not exactly sure if the Chicago to London trek will be in the cards. But who knows? We'll see what happens. Okay, another Unplugged Revisited in the books. Don't forget, I'm running that Eric Clapton Unplugged Deluxe Reissue CD and vinyl giveaway, so make sure to get your entries in for that. And if you want to connect with the show for any questions, corrections, or anything else, you can always email me, unpluggedrevisited@gmail.com, or leave a voicemail by calling 234-REVISIT or reaching out on social media. As always, please take a moment to follow the pod on your platform of choice so that it'll automatically pop into your feed when it goes live. I'll be back in 2 weeks with my Season 1 finale, and I'll be digging into one of the most phenomenal, most engaging, and most enjoyable Unplugged episodes of the show's entire run. I'm really stoked for it. I hope you'll be able to make it, and if you do, I promise you won't be alone because, well, let's just say I'll be there. Until then, my friends, be kind to yourself and look out for each other.
Unplugged Revisited is a Son of a Butch production. The show is written and hosted by me, Will Hodge. The show is edited by Amanda Hodge and myself. Podcast artwork is by Jordan Ullum, and you can find more of their incredible work at jordanullum.design. That's JORDANULLOM.design.
That is the